Hello and welcome to this brief video around Section 24, which is a very live issue currently. The law that has come into force from April 2017, and we're going to look at the fact that Section 24, as well as being a threat to many people, as is much talked about in the media, actually there's a massive opportunity within Section 24. So just briefly, a little bit about us. I'm Jason Living, and I'm on the video here today with my business partner and colleague, Lee Pemberton. And between us, we've been involved in the property investment market for more than 50 years, and have also been involved in operating serviced accommodation since the 1990s. So moving swiftly on to the detail of Section 24. Well, what is Section 24? Well, sometimes referred to as Clause 24, but now it has been enacted. It is actually Section 24 of the Finance Act number 2, 2015. And essentially what that section means is that when you calculate the profits of a rental business, which is held in personal names, then in order to calculate the profit, you do not deduct any of your interest as a cost before you calculate your profit. Now, if that profit then doesn't take you into a higher rate tax bracket, then you won't pay any more tax. If it does take you into a higher rate tax bracket, then the amount of interest you can deduct as a cost and the ultimate tax bill, that calculation means that you will pay more in tax. So who does this affect? Well, it affects existing landlords who own properties in their own name and have mortgages on those properties, where interest has to date been deducted as a cost. It will affect tenants, and I'm not sure that this is something that the government have thought through fully, because if landlords' costs by way of increased tax bills are increasing, then they will inevitably look to pass that cost on as far as they can to their customers, their tenants, by increasing their rents. And that is exactly what happened in Ireland when a similar policy was brought in a few years ago. Rents went up significantly, and ultimately the particular piece of legislation there was scrapped because of the adverse effect it had. Whether that will happen here, who knows? But for the time being, it looks likely that landlords' costs will increase, and that may well have a significant upward effect on rents and costs passed on to tenants. And the third category of people that it's likely to affect significantly are letting agents, because certainly some landlords have reported that they will be looking to sell some or all of their properties, and clearly the effect on tenants will all affect letting agents. And coupled with the proposed ban on letting agents being able to charge fees to tenants, all of that potentially has a significant effect on their businesses. But there is, as I mentioned at the beginning, a significant opportunity contained within Section 24, and that is around this section here, which states an amount borrowed for purposes of a property business is not a dwelling-related loan, and that's the language that Section 24 uses. It applies specifically to dwelling-related loans. So here, this is not a dwelling-related loan so far as the amount is referable or can be calculated on a reasonable basis to so much of the property business as consists of the commercial letting of furnished holiday accommodation. And it's furnished holiday accommodation that is the particular opportunity here, and what we want to focus on today. So Section 24 does not apply to furnished holiday accommodation. So that begs the question, what exactly is furnished holiday accommodation, and how can we take advantage of this effective exemption? Well, to find out the definition of furnished holiday accommodation, you need to go to an HMRC document called HS253, Furnished Holiday Lettings, which was updated in 2016. And whilst a simple Google search will take you to that document, I've been through the document and pulled out the particularly relevant parts which show what the definition of furnished holiday accommodation is. And there are three what are known as occupancy tests that any property has to pass all three tests to qualify as furnished holiday accommodation and therefore fall outside Section 24. So the first of those tests is called the pattern of occupation, and that is the total of all lettings that are longer than 31 days must not, when added up together, exceed 155 days during the year. So clearly, if you're generally letting for more than a month, it's unlikely your property would be classified as furnished holiday accommodation. But if most of your lettings are for less than a month, typically a week or two at a time, then potentially you can put a tick in that box and meet the pattern of occupation test. The second test is the availability test, and that is that the property must be available for at least 210 days in the year. So what that means is it doesn't apply to, say, perhaps a holiday cottage someone might have where they let it for a few weeks a year, either outside the peak season or when it suits them to recoup some of their costs. So the property must be genuinely available for 210 days in the year. And the third test is the letting test, and that is that the property must be commercially let, and that means at full commercial rates, not to friends and family at discounted or mates rates. So it has to be let as furnished holiday accommodation to the public for at least 105 days in the year. So for at least that period, in excess of 3 months of the year, it's about 3.5 months. It has to actually be let. And the particular relevance of that and what we're talking about today is that whilst that refers to holiday lettings and holiday accommodation, serviced accommodation, which is what we're involved in, potentially meets all these tests. If you're letting serviced accommodation for short stays, mainly less than a month, if you're letting it commercially, you're letting it year round, which most serviced accommodation operators would be, then potentially that property would fall outside Section 24, and there's a massive opportunity here. So in relation to Section 24 on the deduction of interest as a cost, there are a number of classifications of properties or types of property businesses that this could particularly apply to, and Lee is now going to go through those in some detail.
That's great, Jason. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name's Lee Pemberton, and what I'd like to do now is really look at different types of strategy for letting property as serviced accommodation. So you could be a current owner, a current landlord of property. Maybe you've got 1 or 2 buy-to-let properties, or maybe you've got a large portfolio of buy-to-let property. And as Jason has already highlighted, Section 24 is going to really hit if you have mortgage payments on those particular mortgage interest payments on those properties. You're not going to be able to claim that back anymore. So what do you do? What's the solution with that? Maybe you're already managing properties as serviced accommodation on behalf of landlords. So maybe you're already doing that. So it's a question of thinking, have you got the right type of agreement in place for that? Or you could be potentially looking at doing a joint venture arrangement with a potential developer. Maybe it could be like a commercial to residential type development, and the apartments that have been created have been sold off on the buy-to-let basis to individual landlords. And there could be an opportunity there to look at doing a joint venture with that particular developer or that's landlord. So these are different strategies that you could look at. The other one that's really popular is rent to rent. So rent to rent as a strategy is where you would rent the property off of a landlord and then guarantee them a set monthly fee, a set monthly rental, and then you would then let that property out from there, and basically you would then obviously take the difference in the amount of money that you're being able to, what you're paying out to what you're being able to achieve. Now, this is really likely to get caught up within Section 24. If it was structured that way, if you did a rent-to-rent agreement, then it is going to fall within Section 24. However, let me just go into a little bit more detail as to how that would work. So let's just be clear to what Jason said earlier on. Okay, so letting by the landlord has to pass all 3 furnished holiday letting tests, okay, or service accommodation is what we're talking about here. So it has to pass all 3 tests, as Jason mentioned, okay. If a property is let to an operator, then the pattern of occupation test will not be met. And this is the key bit with rent to rent. If a property is being rented out to an operator from a landlord under a rent to rent agreement, okay, the pattern of occupation test will not be met because that landlord's going to be, in theory, receiving a fixed income per month and the liability is going to fall on that operator with what they're going to be doing. However, we believe there's huge potential here. And this is what I'd like to go into, just really explain so you really get a good understanding as to how this can work. If you was to structure the agreement under a management agreement, then we believe this would fall outside of Section 24. And let me go into detail now. So let me really be specific. So sort of get a pen and paper and really write this down so you understand what we're about to say here. So let's take this really simply. Okay, you have a management agreement in place with a landlord. And in turn, you're going to then find guests to stay in that landlord's property. So with having a management agreement structure in place, you will advertise that property and you will find guests to stay in that landlord's property on his behalf. You will also potentially manage the cleaning and the housekeeping potentially, and management of the bills, the council tax, TV license, broadband, things like that. So you would then let the property out, you would collect the money in from the guest, so that would sit in your client's account. Okay, so not your main account, it would sit in your client's account. And then you would, let's keep the figures really, really simple. Let's say you charge 10% as a management charge. You will pass across that rental money to the landlord, less your management charge. In this case, let's say it's 10%. I mean, it can be whatever figure works between you and the landlord. So that could work really well. Now, if you're starting off in service accommodation, that could be a really good way to get going because it's really, really low risk. You are going to be managing properties on behalf of landlords that want to get into running service accommodation or have their properties being run as service accommodation. And you, with your management agreement, can do that on their behalf. And you can take a percentage of the monies that comes in. And that can work really well. It may be that you've got a really good portfolio of property, and maybe you've got some where you do have a rent-to-rent type structure in place, okay, which falls completely outside of Section 24, okay, but you've got that agreement in place with the landlord, and then maybe you own some properties, and having a management agreement could just work really well. It could sit nicely within your portfolio, really low risk, using and maximizing and leveraging the systems you've got in place already. It could work really, really well for you. You could take that one stage further and you could say, well, actually, what about looking at doing it as a joint venture with the landlord? So what I mean by that is that you have the same management agreement in place with that landlord, but this time you may say to the landlord, well, look, actually, I tell you what, let's do it this way. I will let out the property, I will find the guests, I would do the marketing, I would manage the property costs for you, etc., etc. Okay, we collect the cash in, we collect the rental money in, okay, which all goes into the client's account. Okay, you could then potentially say to the landlord, I will give you the first £500, let's say, just again, keep the figures nice and simple. I'll give you the first £500 profit that I make on this rental. So you're getting that money coming in. So the landlord knows he's going to get the first percentage of the profit coming through to him. And then you take out your costs, so your marketing costs, your property costs and everything like that, housekeeping, etc. And then you could split the profit 50-50 from there. You may even decide to say, well, look, if you get the first £500, okay, you're still going to charge as the managing agent, you're still going to charge your 10% for managing the property. So you still get your 10%. Landlord gets his potential first £500 of the profit. Okay, you take your costs out and then you split the profit 50-50. And that's a really nice low risk strategy for you. And potentially for the landlord, it gives him the opportunity to be able to make more money on his property than just letting it out on a kind of a 6-month AST basis, being hit with Section 24 and all the other things that are going to go on at the moment. It could really give him a great opportunity to be able to make some more money in his property, pay less tax potentially, and build up a really nice portfolio. Again, within a mix of his portfolio, it could build up a really nice service accommodation portfolio within that as well. So it can work really well for you and really well for the landlord as well. Okay, let's take that management agreement. Let's just look at exactly what we can do with that now and where it can really benefit different types of people that are interested in getting involved with service accommodation. So let's just go into a bit more detail about how this could work with serviced accommodation using that management agreement. And we believe there's massive opportunity here. We really do. So let's say you're an existing landlord, then why not explore the possibility of running your properties as serviced accommodation? Now, you could do this yourself with the right training, the right insight. You could actually set up your properties as service accommodation and it would avoid Section 24 along the lines of what we just discussed. You may be an existing service accommodation operator. And why not? You're already up and running as a business. Why not leverage the existing systems that you've already got in place to be able to offer a management type service to other landlords and get them to bring their properties into your portfolio, and you then let out their properties on their behalf, charging a management fee for that. So it's a great way you can leverage what you've already got in place and you can earn yourself some extra income at the same time. Now, as I've just mentioned, it may be people that are looking that want to enter service accommodation. You know, there's a lot of talk around service accommodation at the moment. It's a fantastic strategy. You know, I've been doing it for a long, long time. It really does work really well. And by looking at setting up your business as a managing agent, it could really reduce your risk. And it could really give you a good opportunity to get going within service accommodation, acting as a managing agent on behalf of landlords. So it could work really well for you without you actually even owning your own property. Now, you may be listening to this and you may be a letting agent. And if you are, I really want you to take note at this point because we believe there is massive opportunity here. You already have the resources in place. You've already got the shop fronts. You've already got your office, your back end systems. You've got a desk. You've got staff within your office. You could quite simply, rather than potentially losing a big chunk of your portfolio to landlords that are thinking they've got to sell up because of Section 24, you could encourage them to look at letting their properties out as service accommodation. And again, with the right training in place, you could learn and you could have a member of your team actually manage service accommodation as part of your portfolio of property that you manage at the moment. And it really could be that straightforward to be able to do that. So whether you're an existing landlord, whether you are an existing service accommodation operator already, or you're looking at getting into the marketplace, or you're potentially a letting agent, there is huge opportunity here for you. So I really do hope that this short video has been worthwhile. And Jason and I really wish you all the best within your property journey. And thank you for listening. Goodbye.